What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we're talking about my favorite baits for early spring. That's right, we're switching gears, talking early spring, pre-spawn fishing, my top baits for this time of the year. Let's go. Coming off the last video I did, I talked about early spring. You know, today is a beautiful day. It's almost 70 degrees. So these fish are starting, and you should start to think about pre-spawn and where they are going. Today's video kind of gonna feed off that last video that I did. If you haven't watched it, it's where do bass go in early spring. I'll leave a link down below in the video description. But today I'm gonna go more in depth about the different types of baits and where I fish them and why, to help really dial in those patterns and figure out those fish as they transition from their winter homes to the backs of bays to get ready to spawn. Now, this is probably one of my favorite techniques. I love spring fishing. Again, we're talking early spring. It's almost winter time. Honestly, it could probably snow or rain tomorrow. You know, these fish get affected by all that. But when you get a couple days like this, almost 70 degrees in a row, they start thinking, and you should start thinking about the pre-spawn. These fish are going to want to feed up. They're going to want to move to get to where they are going to spawn. Remember, they're looking to get to the backs of the coves, the back of the cuts, and they're going to take the easiest, safest, quickest way to get there. Again, I'll link that video down below in the video description. But what baits do you throw to help figure them out? You know, like I said in that last video, if you can find these fish, you can kind of predict where they're going. You know where they're going. You can predict how they're going to get there. These key baits will help you catch them. Again, this isn't the time of the year to be throwing finesse, baits. You're not going to be slowing down and shaking a worm, drop shot, shaky head, that sort of stuff. You want to be covering water, and you want to dial in these fish because they're moving. You need to move with them. My first bait, my number one bait this time of the year is going to be the A-rig. You know, how do you talk about a pre-spawn video without talking about the Alabama rig? You know, check your state's regulations on how many hooks, that sort of stuff. But an Alabama rig is such a unique bait, right? There's a little bit of controversy around it, but a lot of people think, not everybody, a lot of people think it's just a cast out and retrieve, and there's a lot of people that have success doing that, but there's also a learning curve to the Alabama rig. You know, we've done so many in-depth videos. I think Matt did one just a week or two ago, but we'll link that as well. But an Alabama rig, putting in those reel twitches, putting in those rod twitches, fishing them in those key areas that I talked about in the last video, you know, those secondary points leading into that spawning cove. You can fish them slow on the bottom, you can fish them mid-column. If you're up on the flat fishing shallow, maybe you got some water coming in, some warm rainwater coming in, those fish move up, you can fish them right there in the shallow. But an Alabama rig is a great, probably my favorite bait to cast and just cover water. You know, cast, burn and turn, and just try and figure out where those fish are at. You know, we'll link our favorite Alabama rigs. All these baits will be linked down below in the video description. If I blow through them too fast, I will link everything down below. But an A-rig, if you like throwing them, or if you have confidence in them, this is the time to be throwing them. You can catch multiple fish at once. You can really figure out those fish, where they're staging as they're trying to make their way to the backs of the coves. My number two bait, if someone asked me right now, what are my two favorite baits this time of the year to throw? I'm gonna have an A-rig tied on, and I'm gonna have some kind of glide bait tied on. You guys that have followed the channel for a while know that we like to throw swim baits. We like to throw big baits. But this bait right here, the S-Waver 168 in this color, light trout, has produced so many double-digit fish, so many giant spotted bass, giant smallmouth. You can't go wrong with this guy right here. This is what I really like about this. This is actually the bait sanity antidote. And this time of the year, these fish start transitioning. They start getting to the backs of the cuts. They start getting up shallower. This actually is available in a super slow fall. You know, there's a lot of glide baits that shine in current. You know, you need to fish them deeper out of long tapering points. But this is a bait right here that you can slow down and fish in super shallow water and not worry about it getting hung up. Colors, I'll talk about colors real quickly. I like to go with bold colors. You know, this light trout color, it doesn't really look like anything, but the fish smash it, and I think it's because they can see it. You know, recently I did a video on how to catch fish in ultra clear water. Maybe you have ultra clear water and take that advice. This time of the year, as we get those storms coming in, you got the tributaries coming in, the rivers, whatever feeds the fishery you're on, typically muddies up the water or at least stains it, and that is where those bright colors really come in. So glide bait, I like that light trout. If you're on a clear water fishery, go with some kind of ghosty color. I know TW has an exclusive ghost trout that is awesome for clear water, and go natural. Again, like I said in that video. But as I get to these other moving baits, the square bills and lipless cranks and stuff, we'll talk about throwing red, because you guys know how important throwing red in the spring is. But 1 and 2, the Alabama rig and some kind of glide bait. Now you big bait fishermen, you can jump it up, you can throw your 8, 10-inch glide baits if you want, but if you're trying to find the fish, you're gonna get more baits with a 1/68 sized glide bait. Now, that was 1 and 2. I'm gonna kind of lump all of these into just the crankbait category, because you gotta be able to fish all different depths. You know, one fishery you might be catching them in 12 to 15 on a deep crank. Another fishery you might be catching them in 3 to 5 on a square bill. It totally depends on your fishery, but these are this time of the year I'm gonna have all of these tied on. Some kind of deep crank, some kind of lipless crank, and some kind of square bill. You know, we've preached about this bait. We've hand designed this bait right there. That's the Tactical DD crank. That is money, especially this time of the year. You still have that cold water. You're gonna work this bait very erratically, very quickly. You know, we've done in-depth videos on how to fish it, but that is gonna be my #1 deep crank this time of the year. Again, those fish on those lowland reservoirs, you're gonna fish those transitions by the humps, those secondary points on the highland reservoirs, the deep water. You're gonna fish that ledge right there. So you're gonna wanna fish 12 to 15 feet before it steps up, and once it steps up, you can throw the square bill. Square bill fishing this time of the year, so much fun. Again, this is all about covering water. It's all about reaction. Yes, you can catch fish throwing, dragging a worm or whatever, but you're not gonna cover as much water. You're not gonna really break down the pattern where these fish are at. So if you are a finesse fisherman, I challenge you guys to try and break away and at least throw reaction pre-spawn into spawn, and you guys will have success. So getting back, don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. Talked about the deep crank. A Spro rock crawler is another great bait. Again, I'll link all of them down below in the video description. But let's talk square bills. Now these two specific square bills, especially, and colors. So let's talk about the biggie. You guys know this is the River to Sea biggie. It's got a nice, stick myself with the hooks, got a nice big rattle in it, like a one knocker rattle. Makes a lot of noise, a lot different noise than the LV, but this is a one knocker sound. Again, you're burning this bait. You're covering a lot of water. You're fishing on these shallow flats. So as you're fishing the secondary points, and there's the step up to the bays, right, where these fish are going, they're not going to be all the way in the back unless you have moving water coming in. So you're going to cover, out here, Chickamauga, we have these flats that go long ways. So you're going to cover a lot of water throwing that square bill, and it deflects very well and has that loud rattle. Lots and lots of fish this time of the year we have caught on that guy right there. You guys know how much we love that. The other one I want to talk about, you guys know that there's the Little John 50, the Spro Little John 50. Well, they came out with a Type R, which is the rattle. Listen to this little guy. Again, it's all about speed and sound this time of the year. You're going after those active fish. So typically I'm going to throw it in some kind of, probably my #1 color is going to be some kind of craw pattern, like a red. We'll do another in-depth video on the power of red baits. But some kind of craw color. This is my favorite. This is called Cold Blooded. It's kind of a ghosty red crawdad pattern, and grab yourself one of these guys too in some kind of craw pattern. Again, this is the time of the year you guys are going to need to load up on baits. We all know what happened last year with not being able to get stuff, so I will link all the baits down below in the video description. We're going to be doing in-depth videos on all of these different techniques, so this is kind of like a little teaser on the baits that we're going to be catching them on, the baits that we're going to be teaching on, so get them while you can. Again, we'll link everything down below in the video description. But this little Type R right here, it comes in a silent. The other one, just the Little John 50, has like a little rubber ball in it. It has like a little thud in it, but this thing is so much louder. Again, different sound than the Lipless. Definitely check these guys out. I like that bait. So we talked about the deep crank, we talked about the square bill. Now let's talk about the Lipless. You know, this is kind of the in-between between the two. So you got your deep crank, you got your shallow crank, now you got these, right? You can hop this on bottom or you could burn it in a foot of water, totally up to you, but you cannot do a pre-spawn early spring video without talking about these guys right here, the Lipless crank. And it's not just the LV. You guys know that we love the LV. Another great bait we don't talk about a lot, but there's definitely certain fisheries that kind of lean towards the red-eye shad. You know, this is the little 2-tap. This is their normal. But the benefit of the red-eye shad, you get a bigger profile and they're not as heavy, so you can actually fish. So when these fish are up on the flats, you know, the same time that you'd be throwing a square bill, you can fire these things in a foot of water and burn them, cover a lot of water, and get fish to react. Where throwing the LV, it's a 3/4 ounce bait, a little bit heavier, gonna get more hung up. This is gonna be your bait that you're gonna fish more like or in the depths of the deep crank. Yes, you can fish this in 2 feet if you want, but it's not gonna get hung up. The Strike King won't get hung up as much as the heavier LV in the shallow water. But again, the Lipless crankbait is a must this time of the year. Now, my last bait that I'm going to talk about, again, you see a pattern here. We're covering a lot of water. We're moving very quickly. I'm going to go with the Chatterbait. You know, as we transition into this early spring, you know, spawn is on the fish's mind. Grass starts to grow. The water's warming up. The air temps are warming up. Again, you're covering water. So chatterbaits, when I start thinking about grass, you know, sprouting up, some of my best days on Clear Lake, little nugget for you guys, you know, offshore grass, right? Summertime, you're fishing offshore grass. Waypoint your favorite, even Gunnersville, waypoint your favorite grass patches. Well, guess what? Early spring, when that grass is gone, little root system, that stuff starts to sprout. That is where those fish are going to hang out. So, I mean, what better way to pick apart a little isolated grass patch than some of these baits right here? But a chatterbait, I typically like to fish around cover. I like to fish around grass, reeds, that sort of stuff. But again, chatterbait I always have tied on. It's just different than a square bill. It's different than the Lipless crank, and catches big ones. So that guy right there is probably my number 5. So A-rig, glide bait, all 3 of the cranks, and the chatterbait. Now you probably will notice, you're like, what the heck, Tim? You didn't talk about a rip bait or a jerk bait. You can smash on a jerk bait. You can smash. I mean, it's prime for these conditions. Me personally, as an angler, I have more confidence in the glide bait than the jerk bait. And there's going to be a lot of guys that disagree. There's going to be a lot of guys that don't throw the glide bait and they throw the jerk bait. But it is my opinion that they target the same fish, right? Those fish that are looking up, you know, you're jerking the bait, jerk, pause, let it suspend. You're trying to trigger those fish into eating. Same thing with a glide bait. You're reeling, twitch, that thing dances, they shoot up and eat it. For me, I tend to lean towards the glide bait, but I will go ahead and add a 6th category in there. It's going to be the jerk bait because it absolutely smashes. Caught a lot of fish on them. big fish. For me, being from the West Coast, swimbait guy, I love throwing the waver. I've seen the potential. I've seen the fish that it puts in the boat. But a jerkbait. This is actually a Rapala bait. We started playing around with this one, I don't know, a year or two ago, doing some underwater stuff, and it really stood out. But if you're a jerkbait guy, Stacy 90, this guy right here, all depends on the depth you're gonna fish and how much flash and action you're gonna want. Again, these fish are aggressive, but you are fishing in colder water, so don't get crazy. You know, add a little bit longer cadence to your pauses. But that guy right there is a fun one to throw, especially when they're shallow. But there it is, guys. That is my top 5 or 6 baits for fishing this time of the year. Again, you are trying to figure out those fish. It doesn't matter if you're in a lowland reservoir, a highland reservoir, a tidal system, a system with current, or a pond. These baits will work. Again, I will link everything down below in the video description with my favorite colors. Keep it simple with colors. You can go natural, but typically with my hard baits, I'm gonna go some kind of craw pattern. That red is really, really hard to beat. The light trout, you guys know. If you don't know, now you know. That is money. And you know, some kind of natural shad, green pumpkin on the chatterbait, or again, your reds, you know, your fire craws, that sort of stuff. You guys know how hard it is to get that stuff. But A-rig, glide bait, lipless, square bill, deep crank, chatterbait, and an honorable mention, the jerkbait. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down below in the comment section. I will try to get to those as soon as possible. If you didn't watch last video, where these fish are going, definitely watch that. That will help you figure out where and when to fish these different types of baits, depending on your fish and your fishery. As always, guys, we appreciate you. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you soon.